What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down some things that all elite wide receivers do. So the first thing we're going to be discussing that elite wide receivers do is they understand how to manipulate leverage and defensive coverages as a whole. So this has to do with like a pre-snap process that every single wide receiver has. This is a clip from a wide receiver that was actually sent to me. This clip kind of circulated around social media, went pretty viral because it's a hell of a route. So we're going to break down this route, why it's so good, and why you can learn from it from an IQ perspective, not just the technique of this specific route. So this wide receiver is running a seam, and he's going up against a DB who's about I would say 4 to 5 yards, maybe 5 to 6 yards, 5 to 6 yards away outside leverage. So we're going to play at full speed, like I said, then we'll break it down. So he goes ahead and attacks this DB's leverage, gives him a move, and then ends up running a seam route. Now, some of you might be thinking, and this is what a lot of people commented on the video, if that DB is so far outside and you have to run a seam, why wouldn't you just take off and run the seam? And that's a fair question, but a lot of people ask that question because they don't understand why DBs or why linebackers or why safeties, a nickel, will show a specific leverage. When it comes down to deciding what release you're going to do, how you're going to run your route as a receiver, it has to do with two specific things. It has to do with the DB's leverage and the distance he is away from you. Because he could be right up on the line of scrimmage, but he could still be outside leverage. His leverage showcases what the coverage is trying to accomplish and what he's trying to accomplish. So wherever his leverage is, he does not want the wide receiver to run there. He does not want him to run his routes there. So he doesn't want us to run a 10-yard out, a corner, a comeback, a fade. He doesn't want that. He wants us to run a post or a dig or a curl because what do you think he has to the inside? He has help over there. A DB's not going to be playing outside leverage like this without some type of safety help to the middle of the field. Just like how a DB would not be playing inside leverage, like a DB plays inside shade because his help is the sideline. Right? So they're going to have help. Wherever opposite of their leverage, they're going to have help. Now, when it comes down to what I decide to do as a receiver, that has to do with the distance away from him. So this receiver closes the space, right? He brings that line of scrimmage to the DB's toes, and then what does he decide to do? He decides to throw this crossover move, stepping outside of his frame, gets that DB to jump, and now what can he do? He could run his seam, and because he widened this DB by attacking his leverage, the best way to get a DB to move is make him think we are running where he doesn't want me to go. So we angled the stem of my route at his leverage. That's going to widen him. And guess what that does? That creates a bigger window between him and between his safety help to the inside. And that's called running a quarterback-friendly route. So it would be the same deal, guys. If he had to run a post route, if he had to run a dig route, a curl, you'd want to attack that leverage. It would be the same thing if you had to run a 10-yard out or a corner. You would attack his leverage and give him some type of move, take the inside release, and then work to stack him. Because he's not going to let us just run to the outside and get a free outside release because that's his leverage. But elite wide receivers, guys, are able to understand this. They understand right when they come up to the line of scrimmage, they have a plan of action. Going into a game, going into a practice, going into a 7-on-7 tournament, you need to have about 5 or 6 different releases that you like that will work versus different leverage looks. So if I have outside shade press and he's right up in my face, I got a release for that. So when I see that, bam, I execute it. I got a release for when he's 5 yards off outside leverage. So when I see that, I could execute it. I got a release for when he's head up. I got a release for when he's inside. I got a release for when he's inside 7 to 8 yards away. That really wouldn't be a release. That's more like off man. But you have that plan. You have that plan going into a game. So when you see that look, you know exactly why you were going to work that release, and you know exactly the release that you are going to use. So that's a great route there from Cameron Perry. Great example of how you guys can manipulate coverage and how you guys can understand coverage as a receiver. So now, next thing elite wide receivers are able to do is they are able to drop on a dime with great technique at the top of the route. So we're going to talk about how exactly you could drop on a dime from a technique perspective. But before we get into that, fellas, if you are a wide receiver watching this video or even a quarterback and you would like to train with myself and my staff of coaches, check out that very first link in the description below. We are going to be traveling out to 7 more cities across the entire U.S. for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camps this offseason. So guys, go to that very first link in the description below if you'd like to sign up. Our next camp is going to be in Newark, New Jersey. That camp, literally, guys, we have maybe 2 more spots remaining. Then we're going to be heading out to Birmingham, Alabama, Houston, Texas. That camp is sold out. Boston, Massachusetts, same thing. We have about 2 spots remaining in that one as well. Columbus, Ohio, that camp is sold out. Then Boise, Idaho, and Los Angeles, California, where maybe we have about 4 more spots remaining. So guys, if you're local to one of those cities and you'd like to train with us, or maybe you've been planning on it, you've just been slacking on signing up, go to that very first link in the description below. We will not have any more available spots very, very soon. Our Houston camp and Columbus camp are already completely full. We're taking people for our wait list on that now. But guys, make sure you take advantage of us having available spots. Go to that very first link in the description below. We'd love to have you there. Let's get back to this video. So now let's talk about dropping on a dime. So this is a great example of this wide receiver running just like a simple stop route. So a stop route, if you're not familiar, is like a deeper hitch, right? So like a 5-yard hitch, you push up to 5, you put the brakes on, you just stop, balls right there. A stop route is the same thing, except you're running it at maybe 10 to 12, or sometimes maybe even a little bit shorter, depending on where the first down marker is. Maybe it's like 3rd and 7, and you got to break at 8. 3rd and 5, you got to break at 7, whatever it is, right? So this receiver takes this outside release, pushes vertical, puts the brakes on, and then is able to make a catch on that, right? So let's talk about this. So I would say anytime that you are running a route, like, a route that requires you to drop your hips, like a stop route, like let's say it's a dig, let's say it's a curl, let's say it's a comeback. I mean, first things first, what do you have to make this DB think we're running? We have to make him think we're running a vertical. And I think most receivers know that. On routes, we have to self-fade, especially if you watch our videos, right? So you got to make sure that you're running with good strides. You don't want to take these, a lot of receivers before they drop their hips, they take these happy feet steps, or they start taking like choppy strides. We don't want that. A lot of receivers, to help them drop low, what they'll do is they will raise up with their chest so they can have more momentum on the drop of their hips. We don't want to do that, because the second your chest raises up, DB sees that. DB, if he's disciplined, is going to be watching our hips. When your chest raises up, your hips also raise up. So that's an indicator. So the happy feet steps, raising your chest, those are both indicators. And then simply guys will just start to slow down, then they drop their hips. So if we can eliminate those 3 indicators and we could go attack the depth of the route, I guarantee you we're going to get this DB to do something called open up the gate, which is where his hips are committed to the opposite end zone. Then it's just a matter of being able to stop on a dime and stop quickly and change direction quickly. So what we have to do is we have to drop to a 90-degree angle with my legs. You see how this receiver, it's a perfect 90-degree. Right? That is the magic spot that we want to get to. And we want to get to that 90-degree angle like we're playing musical chairs. What do I mean by musical chairs? What happens when you're playing musical chairs? You play that at school or wherever. Music stops, you drop. As quickly as you can, you try to sit down. You have to get to that 90-degree angle like it is musical chairs. Now, you don't want to be standing straight up with your chest, because if you're starting to lean back and you just kind of like sit down, you're going to be on your heels and you're going to be off balance. So what you want to do is you want to try to have a little bit of a forward lean with your upper half. You want to sit in the chair, 90 degrees, musical chairs, like we said, so it's fast. That means dropping violent. For those of you that have heard that terminology before, like violent, that's what you want to think. And when you drop, you want to try to bring your chin to your knee as quickly as we can. So sit in the chair, bring the chin to knee as quickly as we can. And that stop right there is how you're going to be able to decelerate. Now, it's a little bit harder on routes like comebacks and curls because your foot placement matters. Like if you were to snap, let's say he was running a curl, see how he's snapping down with his outside foot? That second step would need to pivot on a 45, and then the third step would need to hook around so he could drive back to the quarterback. Now, if we're just dropping on a dime, right, like you could just kind of like have your toes forward and just drive straight back to the ball if it's like a stop route. So the foot placement kind of depends based on the route, right? But essentially the mechanics of how you drop and how you decelerate is the exact same no matter what. So I'm going to play this again full speed one more time. Great example of how wide receivers can drop on a dime and the technique that we need to be able to change direction when a hip drop is required. Now, next thing that I feel all elite wide receivers are able to do is that, like, you got to understand that, like, routes are always going to be very simple. There are only so many routes that you can run. But I think, like, what great wide receivers do and what, elite wide receivers do is they could add a little something extra to these routes to help them get more separation when facing maybe a little bit more of a talented DB. Now, you have to be careful with this stuff because a lot of receivers will do this, and it wastes a truckload of time. They take too long on their routes. Quarterback's not going to throw them the ball. All kinds of problems happen, right? Now, this receiver uses kind of more of a pressure step or like kind of a hesitation mid route to get that DB to open up more. And he's actually running the exact same route that we were just discussing, that like 12 to 15 yard stop route where you put the brakes on. So he comes off the ball, same type of leverage look, but you see that little step that he takes to the inside, right? That little like jab step. That's what gets this DB to open up a little bit more. Because you remember the last example from that wide receiver, he gave a jab step inside. Remember, attacking the DB's leverage. We see that pre-snap with what we want to do. And he just burst it up, sold vertical, sold fade all the way to the last second, and then put the brakes on. Sometimes if a DB's a little bit more talented, sometimes if the DB's maybe disciplined, maybe he's good, maybe he's got a little bit better technique than us, something extra is required. Because what are we trying to make him think we're doing? Fade. So if I just give him a jab step and then just take off and just maybe run, he may not believe that that's a fade, because maybe that's not how I've ran a fade in the past. I want to make my routes look similar. So maybe in the past he's ran a fade where he comes off the ball and gives a little jab step like this, like a little stutter, and that DB thinks, oh crap, and then he takes him on the fade. Maybe in a real game scenario, not one-on-ones, you do that when you're backside on a play. Let's say you're a receiver and your job is just to run the DB off. It's a run play. Maybe you set this up. Maybe you give some type of move like this so that DB sees it again. He sees this little jab step again that this receiver does. Now when you push up vertical, he's thinking, oh crap, I don't want to get beat again. His hip is fully committed. The gate is fully open. And then what happens? Drops on a dime. And you see, let's pay attention to how low this receiver drops. 90 degrees just about, shin going to knee, could be a little bit better, but he's still able to drop on a dime and get separation because he added something extra to his route. Something you could do also as a receiver, like it doesn't necessarily need to be that little jab step inside. It could be like a skip step. Like you go here and you could take like a double step with your right foot. So you step with the right foot and then you take like another hop step with the right foot, just change tempo, then accelerate. DB overcommits, bam, we put the brakes on. So it's just one of those things, you guys, where elite wide receivers are able to add something extra to their routes when facing more talented DBs or DBs who are maybe a little bit more experienced in this field.